Much like Robin Tunney's character Sarah, the 1996 movie The Craft came from out of nowhere. While it wasn't a $300 million blockbuster, it did capture a certain essence of the 90s, and has a very large cult following. The movie was written and directed by Andrew Fleming, who tends to do movies with female protagonists, like Dick, Nancy Drew, and Bad Dreams. He was fascinated by witchcraft and thought it would be a good idea to make a film that centered around a group of outcasts that managed to tap into that power. They wanted to have 4 unique girls for the leads, and after having screen tests with dozens of girls, they went with Neve Campbell as Bonnie, Rachel True as Rochelle, Fairuza Balk as Nancy, and Robin Tunney as Sarah. Tunney had just finished Empire Records before this, and for that role, she shaved her head. They got her a wig for the movie, and I didn't notice when I saw it in theaters, but now that I know, you can totally see her hairline. She hated having to wear the wig because it took an hour to glue on every day and an hour to remove. One thing that helped Fairuza to get the part was that she was a practicing Wiccan. To get ready for the role, she bought the occult shop Panpipe's Magical Marketplace, which is still in operation today, although she sold it in 2001. The studio was happy with how the film was progressing and gave them a $15 million budget. They were getting close to the start of principal photography and still hadn't cast the role of Chris. Tunney was friends with actor Skeet Ulrich and wanted to bring him in for a test read. Since at the time he was fairly unknown, everyone was against this. Finally, she convinced them to bring him in, and Fleming was so impressed, they hired him for the job. The movie was to be about 4 social outcasts. 3 of them wanted to be witches, but only one, the new girl, actually had the ability. When she came into the picture, the other 3 girls leached off her power and didn't realize that she was the reason why they were suddenly able to do this stuff. Thankfully, being a smaller budget film, the studio let them be, and Fleming was able to make the film he envisioned. Fleming wanted to keep the movie somewhat grounded in reality, even though some of the fantastic elements of the movie were embellished a bit. He hired Pat Devin, an expert in witchcraft and paganism, to be their witchcraft advisor. So most of the chants they did in the film were based on real chants. The scene where they invoked the spirit was taken word for word from a real invocation, with the exception of Manon, who was created for the movie. Devin didn't think it was a good idea to invoke any real deities. Each of the girls is representative of an element. Sarah, earth; Rochelle, water; Bonnie, air; and Nancy, fire. Which is why later in the film, they have her go into a room with a roaring fireplace for no reason. Most of the movie was shot in and around Los Angeles. The exterior of Sarah's house was a real house in downtown LA. The interiors were all sets. They had a hard time finding the church for the film, since most of them balked at the idea of allowing them to film a movie about witchcraft in there. They found one church that was in desperate need of money that agreed to let them film. The trailer Nancy lived in was just a set. Initially, the girls were excited to do a movie that was heavy on special effects. After a while, it wore on them because it was a lot of painfully tedious work. For the scene where Nancy turns into Sarah, they had the 2 actresses filming the scenes mimicking each other's movements exactly. It took a long time to get it right. Then they blended the 2 shots in post to make it as seamless as possible. Since Tunney was already bald, they had her wear a green wig which they keyed from brown to blonde. The girls flying into Sarah's room was a shot from them hanging from wire rigs and composited into the scene. One of my personal favorite shots was of Nancy walking on the water. She was filmed in front of a green screen and composited onto the shot. Then the animators added little splashes of water as she walked, and a shadow. The scene where Nancy was covered in bugs was done by making a green body cast. They covered the mold in bugs and filmed it. They keyed out the green and then added the layer of bugs onto the shot. While Nancy and Sarah were fighting in the hall, they were defying gravity. They built the set of the hall sideways and turned the camera on its side to make it appear correct. Then the actresses laid on the ground while they dropped things on them from above. For the finale, they used over 2,000 snakes and an unknown quantity of insects. They bred the roaches for the film, but the folks who did this bred them sterile, so that even if they escaped, they wouldn't breed an army like what happened with the nest. The effect of the iron bars turning into snakes was done with good old-fashioned hand-drawn animation. The beach sharks were all plastic. Bonnie's scarred back was just a hunk of latex. The rotating pencil was a fairly simple trick. They had a metal rod going through the desk and into the pencil. They then had a prop guy under the desk slowly rotating it. There was a neat effect that was a little subtle, so subtle it often gets overlooked. When Rochelle's in the shower, she looks away, and you see her reflection in the mirror. Only it's not a mirror image, because if it was, you'd be able to see her looking back at herself. The studio was liking the dailies, so they gave them some more money to make additional effects shots, like Sarah walking out of the mirror, and Nancy's hands turning into snakes. The girls joked that as their powers got stronger, their skirts got shorter. The director took a few stories of his childhood and put them into the movie. The light as a feather, stiff as a board trick was something his sister and her friends used to do, although they'd only get the girl a few inches off the ground. whereas in the movie, Rochelle was floating in the air. They did this by resting her on a green platform that they keyed out. When the director was younger, he went to the shore and saw a bunch of beach sharks. This image haunted him, so he put it in the movie. The other thing was when Nancy was running the red lights. Fleming was in college and a passenger with a guy who was trying to time it so he'd drive through the lights right when they were turning green. In the movie, Nancy makes it, but in reality the driver was in a head-on collision, and Fleming smashed his head into the windshield. Lots of unexplained things happened while they were filming. When doing the invocation ceremony on the beach, every time they started, the weather instantly got bad and they had to stop filming. They had to continue coming back because every time they went to film, the weather made it impossible to do so. One night when they started, the waves would get bigger and bigger, but as soon as they stopped filming, it would subside. They'd start the ceremony again and the waves would kick back up. At one point, you could see where the water was almost in the circle, even though they were 80 feet away from the shoreline. One time the waves came in so far, it wiped out the whole set. On the final day of shooting the invocation scene, right after Nancy says, they lost all power. There's probably a valid reason for this, but it still freaked everyone out. After principal photography ended, they had to do some reshoots. The biggest thing was that they needed a better ending. Originally after the fight with Sarah and Nancy, it just cut to Nancy in the psychiatric hospital. They gave no closure on Sarah's parents and what happened to the other girls. So they shot this scene with the girls apologizing to Sarah because they no longer had powers, and Sarah was stronger than before. This is because, like I said earlier, Sarah was always the one who had the power, and the girls were just leeching off of her. What they didn't realize is if they succeeded in killing her, they would have also lost the power that they were stealing from her. After the film was complete, they sent it out for a rating, and it came back with an R. The director disputed this because he followed all the guidelines to get a PG-13. The ratings board came back and said that because the film was about teenage girls that were meddling with witchcraft, there was nothing they could do to not get an R rating. That's the MPAA in a nutshell, folks. The director was upset because if he knew that, he would have threw a few more fucks in the movie.
Fuck you.
The movie opened on May 3rd, 1996 in the US, and was number 1 at the box office. It pulled in $24 million domestically in its run, which doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind, in 1996, the average ticket price was $4.42. The movie was a hit and spent 5 weeks in the top 10. It inspired 2 immediate knockoffs. The first was the shameless exploitation film, Little Witches, which was shot and released on home video right around the same time as The Craft. They even blew out the cover to make Shiri Rappaport look like Fairuza Balk. The other one was the long-running Aaron Spelling TV series, Charmed, which premiered in 1998. They weren't even subtle in their intentions, using the cover of How Soon Is Now by Love Spit Love, which was the theme of The Craft. I love this movie ever since the first time I saw it. While all the girls were great, Fairuza Balk was on a whole other level. She's this tiny little 5'3" girl who completely dominates every scene where she goes full insanity mode. Some of the effects are a little dated, but the story is as strong as it ever was. Right now, not surprisingly, the studio is moving forward with a remake. I don't think it's a good idea, and neither does Fairuza. Much like Empire Records, this is one of those movies that exists as a point in time of the 90s. I don't quite see how they're going to recapture that. There is potential for them to do another story about 4 girls and witchcraft, but I have a feeling it's just going to be a copy-paste of the whole thing, with whatever 4 popular girls they can get, and a lot more CGI witchcraft. However, the director of The Outstanding Honeymoon is attached, so that does give me some hope. But personally, I'd rather she just do another original idea. Although it will be interesting to see if the ratings board gives teen girls practicing witchcraft an automatic R again. It's like they never even heard a teen witch. Top that.
Watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.